15 years now.
So over the course of your career, prison sentences have got longer, and yet you're here to tell me that they've got shorter.
Absolutely, yeah. From my experience, it seems.
You can't keep saying "from my experience." This report has counted all of them, Rhys.
So we live in a world where feelings are starting to matter more than facts. But what happens when a 15-year police veteran, someone whose entire job is based on evidence, calls James to complain about lenient sentences, only to run headfirst into a wall of undeniable proof? If you want to see more videos like this, show your support by hitting the like and subscribe buttons, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. Now let's watch this together, and then I'll give you my thoughts at the end.
What I find a little odd about your contribution, especially as did you say you were a police officer?
That's right.
Is that the sentences are longer than ever before. They've gone up by 40% since 1993, and you think that you've watched an increase in leniency. Absolutely.
So from my experience with sentences, we've often seen sort of a specific example would be around the paedophile hunters and that type of offending. A lot of suspended sentences around that type of offending, which I would ordinarily have expected custodial sentences for. I'm all for rehabilitation.
We can pick specific areas, I suppose, but the numbers are not debatable. The average custodial sentence for an indictable offence in 1993 was 16 months, and now it's 22.5 months. So there's been an increase in prison terms by about 40% over the last nearly 30 years, and you think there's been a reduction.
For me personally,
but we have to stop there, because that is a beautiful illustration of the two questions that we're asking today. Here are the facts. Why do the British public believe the opposite? And you as a police officer are just denying the evidence of your own eyes and ears. There's been a 40% increase in prison terms. That's the severity of sentences. That's not the total number of sentences. It's gone up from 16 months to 22.5 months. How long have you been a police officer?
15 years now.
So over the course of your career, prison sentences have got longer, and yet you're here to tell me that they've got shorter.
Absolutely, yeah. From my experience, it seems.
You can't keep saying "from my experience." This report has counted all of them, Rhys.
Yeah,
it's counted all of the sentences across all of England and Wales for all of the years between 1993 and 2025, and they've gone up by 40% in length, in severity. And yet you're here as a police officer with 15 years on the clock to say, oh, well, in my experience, the opposite is true, as if that matters.
Sorry, so are you saying from the statistics they're saying that the actual sentence is longer opposed to more people are being sent to prison?
The severity of sentences, which has led to, more people are being sent to prison as well. I thought I'd made this pretty clear in the introduction. So the number of people being sent to prison has gone up from 124 per 100,000 in the population to 139 people per 100,000 in the population. And the severity of the sentence has increased since 1993, so under Labour and the Conservatives, by 40%. And I don't want to fall out, but it doesn't matter how many times you say, in my experience, the conclusion you've arrived at as a consequence of your experience is the polar opposite.
Yeah, that seems wild that's the case. But if there's,
but it's not going to change your mind, though, is it? These bloody statistics, these numbers, these actual facts.
Well, I think we all can draw conclusions from what statistics have come from and how we arrive at them.
You can draw one conclusion, and the conclusion is that the severity of sentences has increased by 40% since 1993.
Where are these statistics from, James?
This is David Gauke, the former Justice Secretary, who spent the last 6 months looking at all of the numbers.
What a trustworthy source that is.
Well, he's not an MP.
Was he not a former MP?
He's a former MP, yes. A former Secretary of State for Justice. Well, so nominally, your boss.
I rest my case.
What case are you resting there, Rhys?
That statistics, how you want to present them is how I'd argue.
Okay, and where do you get yours from?
Ultimately, from experience.
This is from the Independent Sentencing Review.
Right. Why? The other question I'd want to know, James.
I just want to know where you get your overall national figures from, if not from the Independent Sentencing Review.
I wasn't talking from my national figures. I was talking from lived experience, James, and the amount of time.
But where do you get your national figures from? Because you just said you can dismiss these. You said, I think, case closed, or I rest my case. So what is your case? Where do you get your numbers from?
I don't think they're my exact words, in fairness, James. But
you said I rest my case.
The point I make is that I think statistics can be leaned whichever way.
So which ones do you prefer?
For me personally, James,
No. For the whole country. That's what the independent sentencing review. We can't all have our own statistics. You have 60 million people in the country. They all choose their own statistics. The ones that the government will use to legislate and the ones that the population uses to understand what is happening and the numbers involved. I give you the independent sentencing review. You, Reese, 15 years in the police service, give me...
I personally think for the country...
No. Where do I go? The website, the statistical collation, the expertise that has been deployed to count all of the instances that we're discussing. The independent sentencing review is good enough for everybody else, but what do you use instead?
Personal experience, lived experience.
Right.
That's all I can draw from, other than a former MP giving me some statistics.
No. It's the independent sentencing review that he is using to explain the facts, in some cases, obviously, pointlessly.
Well, listen, if they're the facts, they're the facts. But from my lived experience...
They're the facts, but I know better from my lived experience.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying from my lived experience...
It is what you're saying. It's exactly what you're saying. I've given you 5 opportunities now to tell me where we should go instead of the independent sentencing review, and you've said my lived experience.
I can only go from my lived experience.
No. You can go from the audited, collected statistical facts that deploy countless people to determine exactly what is going on in the country. You can go to that, or you can just go to your lived experience, and that's fine. I've done my best, and there it is. I mean, if you get arrested by Reese later today, great news. You're going to get a really lenient sentence. If you get arrested in the real world, you're probably going to get a sentence that's 40% longer than it would have been in 1993. And there it is, the most perfect, albeit unintentional, answer to the question of why does the British public believe things that are demonstrably untrue? Because of, what was it again? Lived experience.
Wow, that was a masterclass in how a personal reality bubble is formed and defended, even by a professional, trained to value evidence. Let's break this down. Reese called in with a deeply held belief that sentences were pitiful and too lenient, and you do usually hear this nonsense on the right wing. But James introduces cold, hard, verifiable fact that the average custodial sentence has actually increased by 40% in 30 years. And Reese's response wasn't, oh, your data is from a bad source, or here's the convicting data. His response was, for me personally, he retreated from evidence-based discussion into a personal feelings-based discussion. And that's really how the right wing have had so much success. They've just played on people's insecurities rather than actually dealing with evidence. But the craziest thing about it all is that he's a police officer. His job is to collect evidence and present facts. But when the facts about the entire justice system contradicts his personal narrative, the facts are thrown out. And then James reveals that the source is a comprehensive view by a former Justice Secretary, upon which Reese tries to dismiss him as just a former MP. He attacks the source without attacking the data itself, which is a classic move when you have very little to no evidence on your side. James then gave him the chance to provide an alternative source for his claims, and the only thing, again, that Reese offered was his lived experience. And James's summary is one of the most brilliant I've ever heard. He perfectly diagnoses the political illness of our time. Let's hear it again.
And there it is. I mean, if you get arrested by Reese later today, great news. You're going to get a really lenient sentence. If you get arrested in the real world, you're probably going to get a sentence that's 40% longer than it would have been in 1993. And there it is, the most perfect, albeit unintentional, answer to the question of why does the British public believe things that are demonstrably untrue? Because of, what was it again? Lived experience.
And that's it right there. The battle between what is statistically true and what feels true. That's where we are in 2026 in a nutshell. And in that battle, our entire sense of shared reality is at stake. So what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more videos like this, hit the like and subscribe buttons and ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching.